BB851, turn right, heading 180. 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established.
Thank you so much for joining, first of all. I know you've been doing quite a number of interviews in the past week or so. I've been doing some reading, so
Yes.
a lot of the questions that I had written down have already been asked, and I guess one of the main things is if you're sitting down to have this time with me, I don't want it to be boring for you. I don't want you to be getting the exact same question over and over again. So I've reworked some of the questions and sort of split it up into 3 different subsections. So I've got a little bit about personal, your life, your sort of how you've brought up Northern Pacific, of course, and then just airline liveries and liveries in general from your experience. So hopefully it'll be good for you. This is my second experience interviewing anyone, so thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're probably very busy, so I greatly appreciate that. Bit of background about myself. I'm 21, just recently turned 21. I've been into aviation since I was 4 type of thing, very, very young age. But also, I think what made this so appealing to me, and obviously your work, is I'm a very creative person. I've got no skills, but I do very much like all brand and liveries, and I'm always someone that will look into things and see, I would like to improve it that way, or I feel like they could have done this, or how does that appeal to that? So it's a great opportunity to sort of have a sit down and discussion with you. So thank you very much for that. And before we jump into the Northern Pacific, I just wanted to really speak to you personally. And I'm relatively new to this scene of speaking to anyone in the industry or someone that's worked on such a big project. So I wanted to sort of turn back the clocks for you as well, and when you were starting in the design space. And I think today we're sitting here, you're in New York, I'm in Melbourne, and we're able to communicate like this. How do you believe that the advancements in technology over recent years have made your work? Has it made it easier? Would you say it's changed in any way for you personally?
Interesting. Well, I would say in many ways it's been good in that it's allowed me to connect with people, especially creative people, in a much easier way. So I'm able to bring in people with specialized abilities much faster, and then I'm able to work with them more efficiently, obviously. I've been doing a lot of Google Meet. COVID has definitely accelerated that sort of dynamic. But in terms of just working on livery projects, and specifically on Northern Pacific, I've been working with a renderer who is in Argentina. And so a lot of our back and forths have been on Google Meet. And I think in the past, it would have just been a much more protracted experience, and it would have taken longer. And or it just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm able to sort of expand my reach as it relates to people who have extraordinary ability in a really, really easy way. So that I love. I guess there's probably downsides as well, but I'm very positive about technology, even though it's not my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I embrace it wholeheartedly in that regard. So
That's brilliant. It's good to see. And I think it's obviously the world's changed so much in the past, 2 years. I mean, you could say 10 years, but especially the past 2 years where you may be flying out. And I know in interviews you did discuss how, I believe it was for icelandair, you were flown out, and it's maybe now so we're doing it more remotely type of thing. So I get what you're saying there. In a previous interview, which I read, you did mention something about how you told stories in your head and storyboarded a lot when you were younger, and that may sound bad. That may have come out the wrong way.
yeah, that makes me sound like I'm crazy, but I'm not.
No. I do the same thing. I'm the kind of person that makes stuff. I do that. I storyboard even if I'm watching a movie. I'm like, okay, I will make the next movie in my head type of thing.
Absolutely.
And I love personally doing that. And that leads me to, I guess, the question, and it may be a bit of a different one, but it comes to education. Now, I'm someone that came out of school about 3 years ago, and I know one thing for sure, at least in my environment and with people I knew, creative careers are often frowned upon. I'm not sure if this is something you experienced. It's unfortunate the way it is. And I have 2 questions related to education, so this one isn't so much about how you got into it, but it's if someone's listening to this today and they'd like to go into creative and whether it's brand design, God forbid it could be airline liveries, what's advice you would give them if maybe they're being discouraged by their education system? I mean, we're talking high school, this could be college, this could be someone that's 40, it could be someone that's 60, but maybe they're being discouraged because it's not typical, unfortunately, nowadays. Do you have any advice for that, people that may want to do that?
For sure. So I had that problem. My family, somewhat conservative, had really always wanted me to be quote unquote professional. I went to a private school for high school, which was a preparatory for university. And that was not just my family's goal, but mine as well. And I wanted to be an architect, actually. And so many creative people I know, many designers actually have the same story, which is they wanted to be architects, but their math wasn't good, or they weren't able to sort of navigate the educational sort of path. My path, just by fate, was really by meeting Peter, because we met as friends in our 20s, and we shared an interest in aviation. And he was a little bit more entrepreneurial than I was, and he was the one who sort of mused at the time, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did something that combined your creative abilities and my ability to sell? And so we did the proverbial start out of our parents' basement and create a little design business, which then evolved into, many, many things over the years. But in answer to your question, I think the idea of entrepreneurialism, also using technology to learn, as opposed to depending on a degree to necessarily give you access to something that isn't even real anymore. I mean, the whole landscape has changed so much. So I think creative people today need to be highly inquisitive and very sort of curious around the craftsmanship involved in making things. And often that's a digital pursuit. But to learn those abilities and to become more capable in that regard, as well as follow and nurture your imaginative side, is, I think, the path for a lot of creative people today, as opposed to going to school per se. You can still go to a college, and certainly today's colleges have much more robust creative programs because that world has exploded. But even students who come out of a college degree with design and think that that's all they need, lack sort of the confidence and the ability to trust their own instincts, and perhaps even the ability to be resourceful in their own way so that they can learn stuff on the fly, because agencies today are like, great, I need somebody who is going to learn things quickly and bring that to the table. And some students, I think, are sort of like, well, I have my degree or I have my certificate, I am now a creative person. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can work in design, that's great, but how do you solve problems? How do you bring your viewpoints? So people who are really looking to be in my world, whatever that really means, are people that I think are not afraid to meet people, not afraid to learn, not afraid to be curious in all kinds of ways. And so that, I think, has great power and potential. And when I'm looking for people today, I'm always hiring for attitude, training for skill, and depending on people to sort of bring their ability to find things, make things on their own. Like, that makes people very valuable. So, that would be my thought.
That's perfect, because at the last part there, you sort of led almost into two of my questions, so I might as well combine them. I'll take away the education standpoint, but as someone that may be 15 listening to this, a lot of people that do watch and listen to my sort of content, they're younger, and I think one of the main things I've noticed is that it's helped them move into the aviation scene and whatever it may be, or even we're talking creative now, because we're talking about more brand design and all that with you. In someone's spare time, obviously we talked about school, in someone's spare time, do you have sort of activities or a hobby or a general way that someone could get better at this kind of area, and it may help them adapt to situations in the future? It may, let's say they're applying for a job under you. Is there something they could do in their spare time, whether it be working on Photoshop for hours at a time? And intertwining that, you did mention something being your own person as well, and being able to problem solve, and that's another question I had. And when you're working on projects yourself, I'll just combine the two questions. Do you believe you can heavily rely on your judgment? And if so, do you just sort of know when something's right in that sense? Personally, I'm quite like that, but I would be interested to hear your take on it.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about instinct, which is something that either we're conditioned at a young age to trust because of our upbringing. In my case, it wasn't so much that. My parents were, again, more conservative, so I I never really got that side of it. Mine was more work hard, play by the rules. But over the years, I would say that I've developed an instinct, and that instinct probably comes from doing things on my own, such as entrepreneurial ventures. So the designer I've just hired, who worked with me on this project, his portfolio was filled with like his own projects. School projects are an obvious, but then he's going out on his own doing photo shoots, and he's figuring out how to work with people and problem solve, and he's running into crazy people who don't pay him when they should, and he's learning, and that I think adds to that level of maturity, that confidence. So I think today that's kind of what I'm looking for, are people who are prepared to go out on their own and try things in their own way. Not just stay within the system of, I could say, a school or whatnot, but just like,
that real world experience, you could say.
Yeah,
well.
And you may not be able to get it at the job that you think you should have, but you're going to go out and make your own job. And so I think that is very important. And it rounds you out in all kinds of ways. In many ways you don't even know, but it's I would see it. Like, I would pick up on something that Alfredo is doing, or the way he's conducting himself. That would be clear to me in a good way. It's because I think he's clearly been dealing with stuff like that in the past. So, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, I think it does. I think that's a good... It's just about getting out there rather than sticking to, as dumb as it may sound, you have one photography course, and if let's say we're in high school, hypothetically, but maybe actually then going out and doing some photography in your city. I mean, it doesn't have to be of one subject. It could be anything in your backyard, making something of a very small thing that maybe someone may find silly, but you look at them like, what can I do with this space? And that can help you then in the future for whatever it may be, especially in a creative.
I remember there was a time, oh my God, it probably was just after 9/11. And so the market had really softened, and we were kind of stuck, and we didn't have a lot going on, Peter and I, in our business. And I was bitching to him about, like, I'm bored, and what am I going to do? And Peter's like, well, why don't you do your own project? And so I designed a whole line of airline-inspired paraphernalia, like T-shirts.
Wow.
I did airline pillows, blankets. I did bath mats, robes. Because I like fashion. So I was like, well, and then the core idea was, and it's not that original, but back in the day it was kind of original, was taking a series of defunct airline brands. So British Overseas Airline Corporation, Transworld Airlines, Braniff. But I distressed the logos, and I created sort of a graphic look with these distressed logos, and I applied it onto a billion things. And then I went out and I literally ordered X number of T-shirts, sweatpants. So I literally created a line, and then I built a tiny little WordPress website. And then what I did is I thought, well, I have to have something that will draw people in. So I created an exhibition. And it had so I had mannequins with clothing on them. I had all the clothing and all the elements displayed. I created a graphic backdrop, and I had a show where my friends and family came, and I did stuff. It was just a complete entrepreneurial capsule project that was all about airline. And too bad I didn't keep a lot of that stuff, because looking back, I am very fond of it. But I did a photo shoot, because I did little tags for the price tags, and I did all these.
Wow.
So it was all about merchandising and package design and all the things that are part of my world that I didn't really get to do, but I did it for myself. So I learned all about commerce, learned how to manage inventory. It was a really great experience, and born out of just plain boredom and desire to do something for myself creatively. So it's funny, I haven't thought about that, but your question makes me realize that was exactly, to your point, what I was doing for myself.
Exactly, and look at the benefits it gives you. It's putting you outside of that little square, and you're getting everything else, and it benefits you, because when you take that for the next 20 years, the next 30 years, and, well, I did this and I understand it better. So, I mean, that's brilliant, and it's pretty cool as well what you did. So we're going to get on to Northern Pacific now. I guess one of the main things in this. Obviously, I love the livery. I'll just point that out straight away. I really, really liked it. Rob mentioned to me, who I did interview, the CEO, back in, during the event, I had the chance to sit down with him. He said that I did discuss him a little bit about the livery, and he said you basically got it spot on first go. It was not a thing of back and forth 55 times. What generally goes into making the designs, though? I guess you got it spot on first time, but were there concepts maybe, or type of thing? Or was it just one? Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of work behind the scenes, and I was very careful about what I presented to the client or what I showed them. I mean, I don't think I even told Rob this, but like, there were literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mock-ups, maquettes, tears, and there was a lot of editing, and it was based on themes that were sort of emerging from the overall brand ethos. So one thing that I have been describing in the livery design was that I didn't just set out to design a livery, that the branding process demands a grander, broader view of the situation. So the customer, the category, and understanding some of the motifs and themes that would drive the ideas that would then turn into a story that would then extrapolate into a specific design. So there was so much work that went on behind the scenes. One thing that I would say that helped drive that presentation to success was that, unlike other presentations to clients with livery, I invested a lot of time and effort in the mock-ups. So I actually had somebody render an aircraft, an exact aircraft type, so that the mock-ups looked very real.
Yeah.
In the past, I was sort of showing clients a very flat design, and I look back and wonder if that might have been part of the reason why hopefully the design itself was great, but sometimes clients really need someone to bring it to life in the most realistic way as possible. And so I made a decision early on to deliver a greater sort of mock-up experience or presentation. And I think they were drawn to that as well. So that would be advice to somebody. If you want to convince a client of something, and they're not sophisticated, this is not a sophisticated group of like, oh, I used to work in American, or I used to be the VP of someone at SAS. These are people who, this is relatively new for them as well. So in that regard, I wanted to be really respectful of that. And, no vision, no decision is what I say. So I wanted to make the realistic mock-ups and fully transport them based on a vision that was theirs. And then hopefully that worked out. So I think that helped.
Okay. Yeah, I think it worked out perfectly, but I think you make a good point about the mock-ups, maybe extending them a bit further. I mean, the perfect analogy I could put is clothing. I mean, you see a piece of clothing on the web, but you're not seeing it in person, and obviously you could see maybe someone wearing it in the picture in the thumbnail, but it's just not the same thing. And I think, especially when it comes to liveries, we can't go and grab a plane and just paint it and be like, do you like this, or should I go back and change it? But a mock-up, a rendering of sorts, can really give you an idea of what you're going to expect, type of thing. So I certainly agree with you there.
Well, a couple of things too is that you hinted at this as well, is that I don't have many kicks at the can. Like in my world, if I don't get it right the first time, okay, not the end of the world. I got maybe one more chance. Not that the client will fire me, but the client will begin to question their own decisions. That the momentum of sort of the project will get lost, and then you get mired in sort of suddenly a lot of myopic thinking, and it just, what I need is a client to sort of buy into the entire zeitgeist of the concept. And so we had that, and at the end of the presentation, you could feel that people were completely bought on. Doesn't mean I didn't have other issues, for sure, but that really helped. If I had more time and more resources, perhaps in hindsight, I might consider doing something with motion graphics as well, video. But these clients also, you have to be careful how you manage the budgets. So, I was trying to sort of weigh the pros and cons between okay, I'm going to hire a renderer but I don't know if I want to use additional resources to do video. If I had unlimited resources and time, I probably would have done even more. But I thought that was a good halfway. Like at least that worked. I thought.
I get you.
Well, yeah.
I love it. Trust me, I'm very critical on liveries, and I think that's what we're going to move into now. Is the way I think it's
the dartboard effect.
Sorry, what was that?
The dartboard effect. Like a livery is like a dartboard. You'll be throwing.
That's not good. That's amazing. That's not good.
Yeah.
No, but I think growing up, I've seen how liveries have changed a lot in the past 15 years. So what I definitely appreciated about the Northern Pacific one is it felt like a livery. It didn't feel like, oh, well, you know what, let's have a white plane or let's throw something on the tail. It actually felt, and that was throughout the event. Obviously, I was there up in San Bernardino and Riverside. I was there and just everything felt so cohesive and done well. And I guess nowadays you don't see that often in a lot of the newer releases. So I definitely appreciated that. And that's what we're going to move now is to general livery questions.
You're listening to the DJ's Aviation Podcast. Stay tuned as we depart into another topic.
Obviously, a lot of the people that watch my content and listen are aviation enthusiasts, so they have a lot of strong thoughts on the way trends have moved nowadays, and I thought, why not pitch you some of the questions given your background and what you've been doing of late. I'm sure you've heard of the term eurowhite. If not,
yeah.
Okay. So it's probably one of the most used terms in recent weeks, especially with the reveal of the Icelandair new livery. And I was wondering if you could shed more light, if you know at all, on why airlines may look towards a scheme that is Euro-white over, say, something like Southwest. That is a full-body livery. Are there pros and cons? What would you say their decision-making is? Because, to be honest, it never usually goes down well, and a lot of people will then bash the airline and say, why did you do this? But I guess, do you have any more insight on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think airlines, are really their businesses at the end of the day. And I think they're driven by decision-making that has to do with bottom line, profit, promotion. And I think and often airlines are run by operators. Unless you're an institutional mainline carrier, publicly traded, then you probably, are sort of being managed through board of directors and agencies and consult. But a lot of airlines, they're run by operators, and operators are bottom line individuals who are not necessarily savvy to the marketing world. Mm-hmm. They can make a lot of money, but they're used to spending that money on fuel and buying airplanes. They're not used to spending money on the finer side of marketing, branding, consultants. And I've seen this, and I've had this challenge in the past where they don't appreciate that investment. So they're always trying to cheap out. And I always find it odd. It's like I say to Peter, like, Jesus, these guys are spending so much money. Mm-hmm. He goes, yeah, because it's on things that they understand, planes, fuel, maintenance. But when you ask them to spend money on ideas and stuff that is sort of like ethereal, they often cheap out. The reason I say that is because if you have that, imagine that notion, and then you have an airline and a fleet of X number of planes, they see those planes as flying billboards. And so it's like, slap something on it, which I find a bit garish, and flies in the face of all the other side of the equation, which is the beauty of the aircraft, the romance of flying, the glamour, all the things that I think the traveling public sort of want. But instead you get these, and I'm not saying that they all are horrible, but I think we can all agree that there is that look out there, which just is like, there's no imagination. Mm-hmm. There's no symmetry with the aircraft. There's no sense of at all. It's incongruous. It's just slap the name on. Also, a white plane is less expensive, and that's another factor. So I think those are the challenges. Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that a white plane with a simple graphic element on it, can't look good. I think Lufthansa has done a great job with what they've done in terms of modernizing it. They did lose the yellow, which sort of is sad, but But then it's a German design. It's going to be very sort of clean and utilitarian. It's going to have that sort of that sharp look.
Business-like and sleek. Nothing over the top, just sleek. There. Yeah.
And the yellow is not gone completely. There's traces of it within the brand, maybe in the cabin.
Yeah, in the cabin. Yeah.
But But yeah, I think that's the challenge. And you know what? I was just talking to someone today about this. The cruise industry is also sort of facing the same challenge, which is slapping graphics onto these giant ships where the focus is on just getting people to spend more money. I'm interested to see what Virgin does, because they're a great sort of challenger brand, and they are investing more money in the ships. They're doing things a little differently. It still, has a look, but I'm always interested in the category breakers, the brands that sort of zig when everyone else zags. And when it comes to airlines in particular, I'm very much a romantic at heart. So I want something that has a pleasing sort of look to it, as well as something that makes sense for the public, that is relevant to the intended stakeholders. I certainly didn't want to design a plane that somebody local to Alaska would look at and go, okay, that is weird. Like, why would they paint the planes pink? Like, I don't know, I'm making that up. Or a look that might necessarily not fly with someone who's from Asia. So there was a lot of thought and consideration given to symbolism and cultural sensitivity, as well as something that needed to look, I think, beautiful.
Of course.
So, yeah.
You make a brilliant point there about cultural sensitivity, and that is actually related to one of my questions. And this is completely away from Northern Pacific and probably... But All Nippon Airways, we know they have 3 Airbus A380s. They're all wearing, I guess you could say, unique liveries in their own way. While it's the same design, they're painted different colours. The main purpose of those A380s is fly to Hawaii and Honolulu. And I guess the question is... do you believe that a good airline livery can persuade customers to select them when booking? And obviously this can even stretch to branding. If something is pleasing to the eye, let's say those ANA A380s, and they're sat in Honolulu, do you believe that really has an influence on people's decision making, whether you're sat in that terminal? Because that was one of their main goals, I guess you could say, was to attract people to the airline through being aware of their culture.
Okay, interesting. I need to do a little bit of Googling on that right after this call, because I know ANA, but I want to understand that more closely.
Yeah.
I don't know how directly you can connect the dots between, an aesthetically pleasing livery and people's choices to fly. I think a lot of people choose to fly for reasons of convenience, services, amenities. But I think when you look at sort of the sum of the parts are greater than the whole, or how's the sum of the parts? I forget that quote now. I think the entire sort of proposition, if done well, and there are no gaps, I think that is a factor from what influences people in terms of, I want to fly with that airline. And it certainly impacts my opinion. Like, I'm drawn to an airline that has a certain class factor, a certain style factor. And that could be reflected in how they treat people, not just how it looks, but the whole package. I'm very much interested in that. I mean, if I had to choose between an American carrier, I'm more pro-Delta than I am United. Why? Because so much of the service offering and the brand is sort of airtight in terms of how they communicate it.
Yeah.
And so... And frankly, I don't understand the United Airline livery, not to be catty about it, but I don't understand why they have a Continental graphic on the tail and then they have the United. Well, I know why they did that, but to me, it's sort of, it's market confusion. It sort of doesn't make sense. So all of that to me sort of is like, I don't know. And then the fleet is, they're improving the fleet, but it's just a bunch of things. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think a livery directly, moves people, but I think it has definitely an impact. And done in harmony or in concert with everything else, I think it reflects sort of a greater offering of some sort. And I would respond to it myself, but then maybe I'm biased because I'm an airplane guy. So
no, I
don't know.
I was thinking while you were answering that question.
What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, I was going to make like an analogy, and it's a bit different, but it is the same principle. Think about fashion brands. People are drawn to specific brands, shoes. You could list so many different areas of the world, and they love shoes, they love coats, and they pick specific brands like your Gucci. We all know that the headline brands, and I think how at the end of the day, a lot of the time is you're buying into the brand. You're buying Apple, you're buying into the Apple, you have an Apple phone. I'm talking to you now on a MacBook. It's got MacBook and it's got the Apple symbol. Therefore, it's $3,000 more expensive. But so people move in that direction. So I guess I wonder if it's somewhat the same. And obviously how ANA were trying to really pitch those A380s as, we'll get on board our plane because we're being very aware. And they look beautiful. But I was always interested to see, well, does it actually have a difference? Does it make any kind of difference? But in regards to my opinion, I, of course, prefer something that looks nice. I told you at the beginning, I'm a massive fan of all things brands and creativeness, but obviously at the end of the day, for me, it's what's the cheapest ticket. And I think that's what you make a great point of as well. It's like, from a plane spotter perspective, if something is livery is crap, then I'm kind of like, oh. And obviously my eyes won't be there. But as an example, I was recently in LA, and I had the pleasure of seeing the Air Tahiti Nui livery, which is on a 787, and it's beautiful. It's a full body, and I see that, and maybe I look at a China Eastern or an Air China, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to look at it. But see, from a flying perspective, I guess it's just the cheapest ticket and the most convenience. And I guess, seeming we're speaking on liveries, in your opinion, what goes into making a good livery? What's the aspects type of thing, generally speaking, because I know it can be different for Asia or wherever it may be.
I mean, I think, again, the best liveries come from the best brands. And so brands that really know who they are, and in that respect also know who they are not, I think make better decisions when it comes to specifically, let's say, the touch point of a brand, of an airline livery. So I think there's that high level promise that they're fulfilling. And then I think specifically in terms of design, there is, and I think I alluded to this before, but there is some people who understand the beauty spots on a plane. They understand what looks good on a plane. They understand angles. They know what the 5 great angles to a plane would be, and how that livery is going to accentuate those beauty spots, as I just described them. So I think, a good livery understands the scale and proportions of an aircraft type. Also, color is a good one. There are certain colors that are just, easier to work with. Yeah. There are certain production techniques that I think look great, but are hard to achieve. And so the really strong designs, in my opinion, understand through experience what it takes to produce something en masse versus a one-off. So one thing that I'm learning about is just how do you design something that is going to be replicable against various shops? Like, what happens if Northern Pacific uses a different paint shop next year for their 7th or 8th plane? Yeah. And how does the design and the component parts that go into making that design, how are they affected by different vendors working on? And I think that's a really sort of a part of the project that people don't know. It's like the making of that livery. If somebody has more experience, understands the production process, they're going to probably minimize the amount of risk in terms of those variables changing. So I think that goes into a good livery design. And then, like I said, just an aesthetic appreciation for the aircraft. And then there's just somebody's own personal style factor, which, less is more is kind of my approach. Use of color to create moments versus a dog's breakfast where there's just so much on the plane and it's like, oh my God, like that does not exude a sense of maturity and confidence. It suggests like a desperation. So yeah, of course. And we've all seen those liveries too. So that's kind of what I think works.
Of course. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I've just got a couple more questions, if that's all good.
Sure, yeah.
So this one is regarding the future, and I guess it's perfect again to do with liveries. We've seen a lot of trends over the years. 20 years ago, a livery may have looked very different. If an airline was rebranding, it would have looked very different to probably how it is now. And again, your perfect examples, Icelandair, Aer Lingus, track back 20 years, and I think they would have taken a different approach. In 10 or 20 years' time, how do you see, if you're able to see how trends are maybe moving, airline liveries may move towards? Are we seeing any new type of a trend appear now that maybe we're not noticing? Or in 10 years' time, is it all just going to be type, as we said earlier, eurowhite?
I think I think everything is cyclical. Over over a long period of time. There are no new ideas, so there's only new interpretation. And so I think there is an ebb and flow to what is produced, based in part by how they produce it and the appetite customers have for a certain look. I'm wondering myself if there is an interest amongst designers who work on behalf of airlines to re-examine the past. I mean, that was something that was in my mind a little bit, are there things that I can do to celebrate, move into the future, things that are more heritage? Mm-hmm. So that was, and it's really a talking point at this point. It's something that I'm curious about myself. I don't even know if I have, a clear thought on this. But when I've been sort of bombarded with sort of the Euro-white aircraft of today, it definitely makes me want to go back to a time when things were, all things golden era of travel. And mm-hmm. So when I'm kind of reacting and wanting to sort of take sort of, cover and go back to the past. And then what I want to do is I want to pull from that things and bring it into the future. So one thing I think about with my designer friends is, I wonder if I'm waiting for some airline brand to bring back the stripe. Yes. Which is seen as sort of like super old school. Mm-hmm. And, I think if you just did the stripe on its own, it would be kind of boring. But I'm always curious as to waiting for somebody to be like, oh my God, they brought back the striping. Yeah. And boy, did they do it smart fucking way. I love it. I'm waiting for that. So maybe that's my a bit of the answer is like mm-hmm. looking for somebody who can celebrate the past in a really smart, modern way. Yeah. I did it with, the mask for me was sort of a little bit of an homage to Decline in the past, where they would paint black on the nose to mm-hmm. sort of mitigate the sunlight, which was, I think that was the purpose, I believe. But that was one small thing. And I remember some of on the client side were like, well, why are you doing that? And, I'm like, well, I had a reason for doing it. I wanted mm-hmm. to bring some flair back. I had some people push back and say, that's not a 757, that's an A350.
I've seen that a lot. But
what are you doing? And I like that people push back. But at least I did it with intention. Mm-hmm. And that would be in my defense, I did it with intention.
I get you.
But I think to your comment, I am looking for things that I can do to bring back some sense of something special. And to that comment about the mask, I will say this. I had a gentleman approach me at the launch.
Okay.
He introduced himself. I forget his name now, but he said, you won't know who I am, but I'm the guy that flew that plane for the very first time back in the, not the very first inaugural flight of the 757, but he goes, I flew in that plane. Mm-hmm. And he said, I just want to thank you for bringing new life to that plane, because it meant a lot to me. And so what you've done is you've given it your own sense of design, but you've also brought it back to life. And I thought that was a really smart and telling comment. It was very personal, which mm-hmm. I loved. But anyways, it just sort of, it was flattering, of course. A compliment is a compliment. But the reasons why he was saying it mattered to him was sort of special to me. And so, I don't know. I am always open to new ideas, and I'm waiting for somebody to do something as amazing, if not more amazing, in a smart way. And that's part of why I love the business of the livery design, because you just never know what someone's going to come up with. So any thoughts on that from your perspective?
Well, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure you may be reading my questions, because I've got plenty more, but I'm not going to keep you too long. I have two last fun ones, but you've gone over... First of all, I did have a question about the mask, but I saw someone else ask that, so it's like, I'm going to steer clear. People already know the answer. Like I said, I didn't want to repeat the questions too much for you. So hopefully it's been enjoyable so far for you.
It's great.
But I think I first of all definitely resonate with you when you're discussing the idea of a more personal touch. I mean, he could have just said, I love the livery, I love the mask, and that's it. But he added that because of this. And I think as someone, for you who designed it, it certainly hits home a lot more. I personally like the mask. I do actually think it brings a modern feel. There are some people that will always say, but it's not an Airbus, it's not Air Canada even nowadays. I'm like, no, pardon me. they'll say it's not an Airbus aircraft. I'm like, but you do realise that Air Canada does have it on their 787s, on their 777s, and it's like it's not exclusively. And before that, there's been private jets that have adopted. I mean, most famous, I guess, is Roman Abramovich's private 767. It's not the same, but it's got like some type of mask, and like it's not just. Of course, Airbus have definitely made it popular, but it doesn't mean it can be exclusively theirs. So it's definitely brought a new lease of life. And I think with liveries, I would like to see people be more bold. You'll either go big or go home. Do you know what I mean? And I think when we're seeing these rebrands, I definitely understand why they're doing it. And I understand also how it can be classed as an upgrade. But as I already have explained about 1,000 times now for the Icelandair livery, it would have been good 6 years ago. But I've seen that livery now about 55 times. It's copy and paste, and it's become tiresome. It's become, ugh. And I'm not saying that I don't think they needed an upgrade. I just think I would have taken it in a different direction. And so I'd love to see an airline be more bold with their decision making. And I guess when I saw the Northern Pacific livery, I was like, this doesn't feel like, and in the best way possible, it didn't feel like the livery was coming out in 2022. It felt like it was unique and it stood on its own, other than away from all the trends. That's my 2 cents on it. But yeah.
I want to share with you something. I have obviously a massive presentation, but I'm going to share with you one slide because I think you might find it interesting. It has to do with the masking.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can.
I've never used this before, so let me just. Okay. Okay.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah. Do you mind if I take a picture of this by any chance, or?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Not to share. I just also want it for me to sort of explain when I'm talking about the mask type of thing, if that's all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is what I actually had a whole series of different masking approaches.
Okay.
And I still really like all of them. And so the one at the bottom is the bandit mask, which is the one that I went with. But I don't know, the hood I like the hood, and the chin strap looks great especially when you look at the plane head on.
Yes.
Imagine looking at the chin strap head on, it creates a smile.
Yes, it does. And obviously it also matches the engine, it's like exactly the same, the chin strap design. So yeah, you got continuity there.
So I said to the CEO, I'm like, Rob, can we not do a series? Can I not do a series of different, I know everybody does the tails, but can't I do a series of, and he was like, well, slow down there. But I wanted to do so I had some other ideas in mind, and I still. I mean, it looks good.
All of them looked quite interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. Right. So, anyways, I just on the topic of masks, I thought you'd find that interesting. So
it is. It's cool to see you've got different options rather than just I want this one. You've got multiple ones and explained it. And I guess you can see why all of them would work in their own way, type of thing.
You're listening to the DJ's Aviation Podcast. Stay tuned as we depart into another topic.
I wanted to conclude on 2 fun questions for you, and I guess we actually did sort of touch on this prior, and it was in relation to you going back in the past and changing liveries and all. So is there an airline out there, I want you to pick one, because I know you might have like 50, is there one you would have either loved to have a say in the redesign, so we could be talking, I mean, as dumb as it may sound, Icelandair today, or is there one currently that exists that you would love to have the opportunity to rebrand yourself, and if so, what would you do to it?
Oh, God. Jesus Christ. I can't... My brain just like fries at that. But, well, here's an airline that it's before your time. Well, not before your time, but so Northwest, which was gobbled up in mergers. Northwest, when it was Northwest Orient, it was designed with this red tail, and it used some really beautiful white, gray, I think black, maybe navy blue. Anyways, that livery inspired me, to be honest, at a young age. I mean, at the time, I was probably 10, 11 years old. And I used to see the ads in the newspaper, and I see the planes on the tarmac. And it was such a modern design. It was very forward. It was not like all the other airlines where they would have the symbol on the tail. It was just sort of a very sort of unique look to it. So when they did the redesign, which was, I believe, a Landor redesign,
Yeah.
it felt like they really, like all of the not the personality, the sexiness and the point of view and the style factors all was sort of lost a little bit. And I always wish that I could have been involved. You know, to your point, I was way younger, and at the time I still thought, oh man, I would do things differently. And it's funny that you should ask the question, because it's in my mind. Even today I talk about it. I bitched to friends over drinks about that airline and just what they did to it. So that's one, but that's a heritage airline that I feel like I would have done something way different. Who else?
And just quickly, that's something you could do in your spare time if you have any. Just do a mock-up. If you have like a free hour, get like a rendering of a plane and maybe have your own spin on it of what you'd want to do, type of thing. I know a lot of people that are young do that. They make their own liveries. So you could even maybe have a go at that if you've never done that before.
I actually may do that, just because there's such an audience in terms of avgeeks and airline enthusiasts who would appreciate it. And I have people on my team who love these projects, and even if I were to direct that project with their help, I think we could do something kind of fun. And you're right. And I'm working on a couple of projects. I can't talk about them, but I'm hoping that one of them sees the light of day. Some of these projects do not get past the conceptual stage, and it's a shame, because I typically never just do a livery. I'm usually always doing the entire brand. So it's identity, it's positioning, storytelling, it's design against many touch points, it's pre-flight, airport experience, in-flight. And so a lot of work has been done on some airline projects that just didn't get the financing they needed, or whatever, they got roadblocked. So I'm working on one that the prior CEO of a company that I worked with they were my client, we became friends. And he came to the launch actually, and he's like, congratulations. And we're friends now. He's like, I'm really proud of you. He goes, but listen, he goes, save your best work for when I get, and I'm like, don't worry. So
yeah, I get you.
See what happens. You'll get the scoop on that project if we can get it off the ground.
I'm very excited to see. Again, I swear you must be reading my questions, because the final one I had for you, again, is related to this, and multiple times now you've picked up on exactly where I'm headed, so it definitely makes for a good interview. But next 10 years, it's long, but it's also a short period of time, especially in the field of work you're in. We're talking, and I just want to quickly, just do like a quick thing. With Northern Pacific, did you do the whole branding, or was it just like the livery? Did you ever say in everything else?
Yeah, I worked on, so the name, the livery, everything. The touch point of being the website, the brand video was completely my project.
That's why.
The only thing I didn't work on, which, it is what it is, but I didn't work on the interior cabin. But that being said, that's a highly specialized field.
It is, yeah.
But they did, of course, work with the mood boards that I created. So they were very much, and I give them a lot of credit for pulling from, faithfully pulling some of the motifs and designs to incorporate. And I really like what they did. But, similar to you, I'm a big fan of the interior of an aircraft. And I follow Priestman Good. I'm not sure if you know that firm.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
I follow their work closely. They're like sort of at the top in the world of interiors. They are kind of one of the big players. And so because I'm a big fan of the ceremony of travel, so whether it's airport or aircraft, I'm all about the service protocols and the products. And if I could have a dream job, one of the dream jobs I'd love to have is to be in charge of, let's say, British Airways first class product globally. So every aspect of that first class, whether it's, customer experience, in flight. So I'm very much interested in that as well, is like how people interact on the aircraft. I was flying Delta, and I was really disappointed. I flew in their Delta One product.
Okay.
And they have these new suites, which are really nicely designed, except they have these arm panels that whole panel pulls up and it can go right down, but it never stays up. It always goes down. So you're sitting there. Like,
that is the worst.
It's like, this is an expensive ticket, and I'm trying to feel like king of the world right now, and instead I feel like
you're ruining it for me.
It's kind of ruining it, but to my point about just a beautiful aircraft interior, I'm very sort of attuned to that as well.
Of course. Well, at the end of the day, it only goes so far when you have a livery. You need everything to sort of intertwine and match. You don't want the plane to be pink and then the inside yellow. I mean, unless we're speaking there the colours, you want it to have some continuity, and that's definitely always important. So just finally, the next 10 years, as I was mentioning, what are some of the goals, ambitions you have for yourself? It doesn't just have to be related to aviation. I know you are passionate about that, but I thought we'd conclude on sort of a personal note for you and your goals moving forward.
Good question. I mean, one thing that I think I'd like to live somewhere else. I live in New York. I maybe would like the West Coast a little bit, so somewhere warmer on a personal note. In terms of professional sort of ambitions, I would like to work on more airline projects, bigger airline projects. I think part of me is always drawn to sort of expanding my reach and my scope. I wonder how those challenges would pan out, because as you get into the bigger airlines, you're usually working, it's more political, and I'm not good with politics, so that would be a challenge for me. But I'm ambitious, and so is Peter. I mean, we are and he's an airplane guy too. So we are always watching the market, and we're always looking to see what's going on. And so, my goal is to work on more of these projects. Perhaps I could specialize our practice area completely and just do this exclusively. But right now I work on other projects. I've got other things going on, and I just, I would love to just work exclusively on an airline project. I would love to maybe have more of a hand on the interiors, as I alluded to earlier. And I would love to work with a bigger team. And I don't mean be part of a large, massive agency, but I work with a very small team of people. It's 2 other people and me, and I would love to have a team of maybe 10 people, so that I could cover more ground, that more people could be sort of working on ideas together. So that's sort of a thought, and that's totally attainable. But I'm very picky about who I work with, as we all are very, we take it so seriously. So it's a slow process, but that would be one of my goals.
Of course, that's brilliant. It's always important to take care with what you do and pick the right thing, and obviously something you're passionate in, because you find that if you're passionate in it, the results are typically done a lot better because you want to execute it at absolute perfection. So I definitely understand.
Well, clients feel it. Like, I think Rob McKinney, and I've been very public about this, but I've never been given this much autonomy. And Rob McKinney from day one has been a real champion of my work. And so I will go above and beyond for him. I will do whatever it takes. And so that's why for the event, I was like, I was everywhere. I'm very appreciative of that, but I'm also he's passionate, I'm passionate. It's good. It's a good combination. So
the event was amazing. Trust me. I don't know if you don't know this, but that was the first event I've ever been to in the aviation scene. I'd never been to anything before. And I had my jaw dropped from the minute to the minute I actually got to the hotel, and then the whole entire event, my jaw was just on the floor. I couldn't believe it. And I said to a couple, like my parents and so forth, and a couple of friends and even people there, I was like, this doesn't feel like it's for Northern Pacific, and that's in the best way possible. It felt like it was for an airline that had been flying for 150 years and was celebrating their 150th birthday.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't, but like I said, it was my first event, but even still, I mean, I've been to other sorts of more private functions, and whether it was for school, and I think just being there, everything felt intertwined in its own way, and I kept banging on about that. I mean, even the flyers, even the billboard, even the lanyards that were handed out, everything just worked, and I think it was incredible. I think it definitely elevated the experience, rather than being dumped in a hangar, as an example, just sort of dumped there, just a couple of chairs. Everything just felt perfect, from the music to, as you're walking into the hangar, you get a bit of an insight into the airline. So you did an amazing job, trust me there.
Oh, geez, I really appreciate that, because it was a big deal, and it was I was obsessed with making it all work. And to be honest, I've never done an event like that before. So I was as nervous as I was excited to do something great. I was like, Jesus. And we were working with an events company on the West Coast, so I was very arm's length to the whole thing. And so I was particularly involved, very much so in all the details. But I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot.
So it was a first then, I'm guessing, for many of you, because obviously I've been in close contact with Claire, and that was the first event she's ever done, type of thing. Yeah. And so a lot of it was first, and that was another thing I couldn't quite believe, because for people that are doing that all for the first time, it had no hiccups. It ran perfect. Well, to my knowledge, as someone.
But no, I think you're right. It was basically was Peter, me, Claire, and Alfredo.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
Two of which junior, but you know what? Goes to show you, hire for attitude. Like both of those two were so freaking committed.
Mm-hmm.
They felt my pain, they felt my excitement, and they wanted to do. And you know what? I've been in this business long enough, and you can get jaded so easily. And there have been times where I may not have, but this was one of those exceptional, okay, we're doing this. And everyone took deep breaths. And we had a lot of fun too. We had a lot of fun. And so I want people who work with me to sort of ride that roller coaster, and hopefully I can deliver an experience that we can all write home about. That for me makes me happy, versus the person who works at the big fancy firm, but they're never going to get near anything close because there's just so many levels.
Of course.
And I told Alfredo that when we interviewed, and I said, Alfredo, listen, I'm going to be really honest with you. Our business is a little, there's a risk factor with my business. I'm always looking for my next client, and I eat what I kill. This is not, so if you need if you want the guarantees of the job, because people want that, that's nothing wrong with that. I just don't know. But if you're prepared to kind of go down this path with me, I'm hoping that I can deliver some great experiences for you. And so sure enough, the night of the event, once it all happened, we were having a drink, and I'm like, Alfredo, I just want you to know, I'm happy because I'm able to give you this experience,
mm-hmm.
and that means a lot to me. And he was like, wow, that is the business.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I appreciate your observations and your compliment. Yeah.
It was brilliant, trust me. I don't want to keep you any longer, but I wanted to say it was an absolute pleasure having the chance to sit down with you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your evening also to sit with me.
Okay, yeah, Perfect. Sure, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Thank you.
Voice, oh God, I don't want to hear it.
You get used to it. I was like that originally, and then 5 years ago, I'm like, I don't sound too bad. But trust me, at first I was like, it's just I get what you mean. But thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing whatever you do in the future as well, especially in the aviation skiing area. Pardon me.
That's good.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All
Take
right.
care.
Have a good night.
You too.
Good day.
I'm going to sleep anyway, so bye-bye. Take care.
All right.